Let's talk about the true cost of self publishing a book. So, when I say this, what's the first thing you think of when it comes to cost? You're probably thinking of editing and cover design. And those are two very expensive things that indie authors have to pay for. But I think when a reader sees that an indie book costs $4.99 on Kindle, we can sometimes forget just how much time, money, and emotions have gone into that book. So, when I say the true cost of self publishing a book, I'm not just talking about money. Because when it comes down to it, authors aren't just simply writing books, they are basically running their own little tiny publishing company. So let's start with the obvious cost, which is money. So, the amount someone spends on self publishing their own book can range. A person with a small budget can self publish their own book, but most people will hire professionals to do things for them rather than doing it themselves because they're not a professional in that area. And contracting someone or multiple people out, it can get really expensive really fast. So, this is something that I've come to learn. And for those of you who don't know, I am not an author, okay? I am just an indie author, advocate, fan, supporter, promoter, whatever. Okay. My whole business is centered around indie authors and lifting them up. Now, I have learned throughout my time talking to and working with indie authors that editing isn't just one person. There are multiple different forms of editing that is going on. So, did I have to do a little research to do this? Yes, because first there's developmental editing, which basically looks at the story itself, checking for like plot holes, structure, pacing, characters, those kinds of things. And then there's copy editing and line editing. And then there's proofreading. An author might use some or all of these services depending on their budget, their book, and their publishing process. And then there's the cover. And as much as we want to say don't judge a book by its cover, everybody knows that we all do. So there's a few ways that authors can do a cover. So they can do it themselves. They can buy a pre-made cover, or they could hire an artist or a designer to create a completely custom cover for their book. And nowadays, most authors are investing in character art because everybody wants character art. I mean, I know I'm guilty of this. Every time I start reading a book, I have to look up fan art or character art of these characters cuz it helps me to just see them in my brain. And then there's formatting. So their ebook needs to work on an e-reader, and the paperback and hardcover versions needs to look professional on the inside when it gets printed. And even after all of that, we're still not done. Authors will get ISBNs, they will get websites that they have to pay for the domain, email marketing software. How are they going to distribute their art copies? Bookkeeping, or other like business softwares, a business license. And I know it's not cheap. It's not cheap. And maybe these authors are selling their books directly, which is a whole other round of expenses. Books, boxes, labels, packaging, postage. Maybe you want to attend an author event. Then there's registration, travel, accommodations, inventory, signage. Are you picking up what I'm laying down? It's freaking expensive to be an author doing it on your own. But there's one expense that is the bane of all indie authors' existence. Every time I have interviewed an indie author, they tell me that their biggest struggle, 95% of the time, it is marketing. So let's talk about it. I talk about this a lot on the Starlit Shelf. One, because I know it's a big struggle for indie authors, and two, it's what I help them to do. But getting their book in front of new readers is extremely difficult. So, when all is said and done with them creating their book and doing all the expenses related to that, now they have to get it in front of the right audience. They could hire a publicist. They could be sending out physical copies of their arcs, going to those conventions to table and be in front of potential new readers, paying for promotional services. That's what I do. Hiring designers, running giveaways, and a dozen of other things that I can't think of right now. And what's even and what's really sad about this is that none of this guarantees that they're going to gain readers. And I think this is something that is really important to remember, and a very important distinction that needs to be recognized is that even if an author spends $500 on marketing their book, that does not mean that they're going to make $500 back from book sales. They may make significantly more, but they also could make significantly less. This is the risk that indie authors take when they are the publisher. And that leads me to the costs that you don't see on a receipt, because there's also the cost of time. Imagine just how many hours it takes to write a book and then do the revisions and then get beta readers and then get editing done and then proofreading and then formatting and uploading the file. You get what I mean. I'm a broken record, but all of those things that I talked about earlier all takes a ton of time and depends on other people's time as well. And somewhere in between all of that, you're supposed to be writing the next book. How many of us readers have ever commented on an author's post about their book being like, "Oh my gosh, I loved it. I can't wait for book 2," or "When's book 2 coming out? I need book 2 now." I know I've done it. And it's it's one thing when you do that to like a trad author because they have the big support of a publishing house behind them, that basically the author just has to write their book and make the deadline. Indie authors are managing all of it on their own. All of this leads to the final cost that indie authors have to pay that most readers do not see, and that is the emotional cost. Arguably the most important and the one we don't talk about enough. So, we talked about the time and the money. So, imagine that you've spent years or months or years and all of your savings on this one project. And you're finally ready to publish it and set a release date, and you're gearing up, you're marketing it, you're trying to spread the word, you've sent out all the copies, you've gotten a few reviews, and you don't get any pre-orders, or release date comes and goes and you've barely made a dent in the amount of money that you owe yourself from what you just spent. So let's say they do make some sales, but then they're wondering, like, are people actually reading it? Did they like it? They're probably refreshing their reviews and their numbers constantly. And more likely than not, these authors are also part of the bookish community on our social platforms, and they're friends with other authors and they are seeing other authors become successful, and they're just sitting here waiting for their time to shine. And I know indie authors are so supportive of one another, and I'm sure they're genuinely happy. But I know if I was in their shoes, I would also be wondering why it's not happening for me. And I would be questioning myself a lot. This is why it's so important as readers that if you pick up an indie book, first of all, give indie books a chance. Give them a chance. And if you read it, if you finish it, if you like it, post about it, share it, leave a review. I cannot emphasize this enough, the power and impact readers have in an indie author's lives. Another thing that I deal with in a different form, which is like content creation, but it's burnout. It is exhausting doing this constantly and feeling like you're shouting to the void. Do you know how often I've heard authors feel that way when they post content or feel like they have to market their own book and promote their own book? They always say it feels like I am shouting into the void. Because we all know the algorithm sucks when it comes to indie authors. The algorithm wants to push what's already trending. And what's trending is the books that are typically backed by big publishing houses that have big marketing teams that have been marketing the book for months prior to their release date. And another thing, okay, so indie authors are doing all of these things that I'm talking about, okay? But this isn't their full time job most of the time. They're also mothers, fathers, they have families, they have households, they have other full time jobs. They are balancing all of this all while doing normal life stuff. Blows my freaking mind. Indie authors are amazing. They're amazing. That's it. Indie authors are amazing because of how much they take on. And not only that, but they are just so genuinely talented. I am still in amazement by the books that I have read. These authors up here, I am in awe of them. All of them are unique. All of them are talented writers. They just decided to go a different route. They wanted more control over their book, right? And I feel like people are so quick to dismiss authors who have decided to self publish. I want to remind any readers out there that it does not cost a lot of money to support indie authors. A little goes a long way with them. So, what are the best ways to support indie authors? Well, obviously, you can buy their book. That's probably the biggest, most obvious one. But you can also request their book at your local library. If you read the book, leave a review, post about it, recommend it to a friend, share an author's post, comment on something that they're promoting, add their book to your TBR. If you see a book by an indie author that you think that you would like, pre-order it. From our side as readers, these gestures don't seem like a lot, but I promise you it makes a difference in an indie author's life. And I hope that this conversation helped to bring a little bit more awareness and understanding around indie books and indie authors. Because self publishing isn't just writing something on Word, uploading it to Amazon, and then making a bunch of money. There is so much more that goes into this process that we as the readers do not see. I like to say that indie authors wear a lot of hats. They're writers, they're publishers, they're marketers, they're small business owners, and all of the other things that I have already mentioned. And I know for indie authors, this is a labor of love. They wanted to tell a story, they wanted to create art. Because being an indie author means believing in something long before there's any other evidence that other people believe in it too. This is the reason that I am going to continue to do what I do. I never shut up about indie authors and indie books. I will always encourage readers to take a chance on an indie book. I hope that if you're a reader and you're following me, that I have helped to encourage you to look outside what the algorithm is feeding you in regards to book recommendations. Because something as simple as buying a book, leaving a review, sharing it with a friend can make all that investment of time, money, and emotion for an indie author feel worthwhile.